Pennsylvania is not just about American history. It is about towns that were once too alive and then died far too quickly. In this state, there is a town burning from beneath the surface, a fire that may continue for centuries. There was a boomtown whose population jumped by 15,000 people in a single year, and then vanished almost as fast. There are villages emptied by war, and steel towns once filled with thousands of workers that now hold only thousands of memories. This is not just a list of abandoned places. It is about underground fires, collapsing industries, government projects, deadly floods, and economies that slowly decayed. 15 small towns in Pennsylvania. Some are already gone. Some are on their way. If there is one town in America that is truly dead but not yet buried, it is Centralia. In 1962, a trash fire is believed to have ignited a coal seam beneath the town. The problem? The fire spread into an extensive underground mine network, and it has never been extinguished. The ground cracked open, toxic smoke rose from the streets, and carbon monoxide levels spiked. In 1981, a young boy nearly fell into a sinkhole more than a dozen feet deep. That became the turning point. At its peak in 1960, Centralia had around 1,000 residents. Today, officially almost none. The state revoked its postal code in 2002. The government funded a massive relocation effort, and most of the houses were demolished. Remarkably, the underground fire is estimated to keep burning for another 250 years. The town even served as visual inspiration for the horror film Silent Hill. If Centralia was the heart of the fire, Byrnesville was the neighbor caught in its shadow. Located just a few miles away, Byrnesville was once a quiet mining community. Its population was never large, only a few hundred people in the mid-20th century. But it was stable, with a church, family homes, and the everyday rhythm of a Pennsylvania coal town. Then, the 1962 mine fire in Centralia began spreading through underground tunnels. Fire does not respect administrative boundaries. The ground became unstable, toxic gases surfaced, and the government eventually included Byrnesville in the relocation zone. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, homes were purchased and torn down. Unlike Centralia, which still has a few stubborn residents, Byrnesville was completely emptied. Concrete City died because time simply stopped. Built in 1911 by the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad as housing for coal miners, the complex consisted of rows of reinforced concrete homes, an architectural experiment that was considered futuristic at the time. There were 16 large structures, each divided into several small apartment units. The goal was simple: fireproof and affordable housing for coal workers. But reality proved harsher. The layouts were cramped, damp, and uncomfortable. Workers gradually moved away, and by the 1920s, the complex was already abandoned. There was no massive fire, no dramatic disaster, just a failed concept and the collapse of the coal economy in Luzerne County. Today, the buildings still stand, empty and moss-covered, filled with graffiti and urban legends. They were never truly inhabited again. If Concrete City feels like a failed experiment, Yellow Dog Village is a town that lost its owner. Founded around 1907 by the Pittsburgh Buffalo Company, this village was built for iron factory workers in western Pennsylvania. There were about 40 simple wooden houses, along with a small school and basic community facilities. It was a classic company town. Its entire existence depended on a single industry. While the steel industry thrived, so did the village. But when the American steel sector began to weaken in the mid-20th century, its pulse faded as well. The factory closed, jobs disappeared, and families moved away. With no alternative economy, Yellow Dog Village slowly emptied out. Today, the wooden structures still stand, some partially collapsed, others weathered by time. There is no permanent population, only the forest gradually reclaiming the land. Before Pennsylvania became known for steel and coal, there was a time when timber was king. Ricketts was born from that era. Established in the late 1800s by lumber entrepreneur Robert Bruce Ricketts, the town served as the center of major logging operations in what is now Ricketts Glen State Park. During the height of the lumber boom, Ricketts had a population in the hundreds, complete with a small hotel, stores, and worker facilities. But like many lumber boom towns, its life was short. The forests were cut down within a relatively brief period. Once the resource was gone, the railroad tracks were removed, businesses closed, and residents left. By the early 20th century, Ricketts had practically vanished from the map. Interestingly, the area once filled with the sound of saws and locomotives is now a state park known for its stunning waterfalls and popular hiking trails. If there was ever a town that rose like a rocket and crashed just as fast, it was Pithole. Founded in 1865 after an oil well struck an astonishing flow in the Oil Creek region, Pithole transformed from wilderness into a booming town within months. In a single year, its population surged to an estimated 15,000 people. Luxury hotels, a theater, banks, and even its own newspaper appeared almost overnight. It was the beating heart of America's early oil rush. But the excitement was fragile. The oil wells quickly ran dry. Overspeculation and fires accelerated the decline. In less than 3 years, the population collapsed dramatically. Buildings were dismantled, relocated, or left to decay. By the early 1870s, Pithole had effectively become a ghost town. Today, the site is marked only by historical signs standing in an open field near what is now Oil Creek State Park. If the previous towns died from fire or economic collapse, Laurel Run was struck by water. Located in Luzerne County, Laurel Run was a small community that depended on coal mining throughout the early 20th century. Its population was never large, a few hundred to around 1,000 at its peak, but it was stable as a working-class town. Everything changed in June 1972 when Hurricane Agnes hit Pennsylvania. Extreme rainfall caused a mining dam above the town to fail. A surge of mud and floodwater swept through Laurel Run within minutes. Some houses were carried away. Others were completely destroyed. Lives were lost, and the damage was so severe that many residents chose never to return. After the disaster, the population dropped sharply and never fully recovered. The town did not vanish entirely like Centralia, but the scars of 1972 remain a lasting symbol of how vulnerable small mining communities can be to catastrophe. Eckley is unusual. It is not truly dead, but it does not live the way it once did. Founded in 1854 as a coal mining company town, Eckley was built with a remarkably orderly layout. Small worker houses lined up symmetrically, separated by job rank and social status. At its height, hundreds of families lived here, all dependent on the anthracite coal industry that powered Pennsylvania's 19th century economy. When the coal industry began to collapse in the mid-20th century, the population shrank dramatically. Many homes were left empty, businesses closed and the community slowly faded. Instead of being demolished, Eckley was essentially frozen in time. Today, it is preserved as part of Eckley Miners Village, a historic site maintaining more than 100 original buildings. The film, The Molly Maguires, was even shot on location here. Alvira did not die because its economy collapsed. It was emptied by order. Originally a small farming village in Union County, Alvira was home to hundreds of families with churches, schools, and farmland passed down through generations. But in 1942, during World War II, the federal government seized about 8.5 thousand acres of land to build a munitions facility. Through the power of eminent domain, around 400 families were forced to relocate. Homes were demolished or left vacant. The site became known as the Susquehanna Ordnance Depot, producing and storing wartime ammunition. After the war, portions of the land were converted into conservation areas now included in the White Deer Creek Wildlife Management Area. Yet remnants of underground concrete bunkers remain hidden in the forest, locally known as the Alvira bunkers. Frick's Lock was never a large town. Even at the beginning, it was only a small village along a canal. But its fate changed dramatically because of modernization. Founded in the 19th century along the Schuylkill Canal system, Frick's Lock survived on the steady movement of boats carrying coal and agricultural goods. When railroads took over transportation, activity began to decline. Yet, the small community endured, with a handful of families remaining into the 20th century. Then came a dam project in the 1960s and 1970s aimed at improving navigation along the Schuylkill River. The surrounding area was deemed flood-prone. Government agencies gradually purchased properties from residents. Families moved away, homes were abandoned. Frick's Lock was left to decay. Today, only empty brick buildings remain, some partially collapsed, hidden among trees near the river. Before steel dominated Pennsylvania, iron ruled. Scotia was born from that furnace era. Established in the 1880s by industrialist Andrew Carnegie through his Carnegie Steel Company, Scotia was a remote company town in Centre County. It was built specifically to support iron ore mining and smelting operations. At its height, hundreds of workers and their families lived in modest wooden houses, supported by a small hotel, a company store, and a church. There was one major problem: location. Scotia sat far from major transportation routes and from cheaper coal sources that were more efficient for modern steel production. As technology advanced and the industry shifted to more strategic areas, operations in Scotia became uneconomical. By the early 20th century, the facilities were shut down. Houses were sold or relocated, railroad tracks were removed, and the community dissolved. Today, only foundations and faint road traces remain in the forest. If the previous towns died suddenly, Mahanoy City is an example of a place that slowly lost its breath. Founded in the 19th century as a center of anthracite coal mining, the town was once densely populated. In 1940, its population reached about 16,000 people. Streets were lined with shops, ethnic churches stood side by side, and the economy revolved around the mines and the railroad. Then the coal industry collapsed. Mechanization, energy shifts, and mine closures erased jobs. Starting in the 1950s, residents began to leave. Today, the population is around 3,600, a decline of more than 70% from its peak. The median household income sits well below the national average, around $37,000 per year, and the poverty rate exceeds 35%. Many buildings along Main Street stand empty, old houses sell for low prices, and job opportunities are limited. Mahanoy City is not yet a ghost town, but it reflects a familiar Pennsylvania pattern, an industrial town not fully dead, yet steadily shrinking, generation after generation. If Mahanoy City slowly loses its breath, Shamokin feels like a town that keeps fighting but never fully recovers. Founded in the 19th century as a center of anthracite coal mining, Shamokin was once loud, crowded, and industrial, with railroad lines, rows of miners' bars, and a population that peaked at more than 20,000 people in the early 1900s. Coal was its heart, and when that heart weakened, the entire body of the town declined with it. Today, the population stands at around 6,700 people. The median household income is roughly $39,000 per year, well below the national average. The poverty rate approaches 30%, and vacant properties are scattered throughout the downtown area. Large industry is nearly absent. Employment is dominated by small retail, public services, and commuting to nearby cities. Shamokin is not a ghost town, but demographically and economically, it is a city still standing, while gradually shrinking. If there is one town that symbolizes the collapse of the American steel industry, it is Braddock. Located just outside Pittsburgh, the town was once dominated by the massive Carnegie Steel Company plant, which later became part of United States Steel Corporation. In the early 20th century, its population exceeded 20,000 people. Smokestacks burned day and night. The economy revolved entirely around steel. Then, the 1970s and 1980s arrived. Deindustrialization struck the Rust Belt hard. Plants shut down, and thousands of jobs disappeared in a short period of time. Braddock's population collapsed. Today, it is around 1,600 people, a decline of more than 85% from its peak. The median household income sits near $37,000 per year, and the poverty rate approaches or exceeds 30%. Entire blocks are empty, houses stand abandoned, and former industrial land lies unused. Braddock has seen revitalization efforts and remains inhabited, but its landscape still reflects the scale of what was lost. If Braddock represents the collapse of steel, Duquesne is the long echo that followed. Located along the Monongahela River, Duquesne once thrived because of a major steel complex operated by United States Steel Corporation. At its mid-20th century peak, the population surpassed 21,000 people. Schools were full, downtown was active, and generations of steelworkers built their lives there. Then, the mill closed in the early 1980s. Within a decade, thousands of jobs vanished. Without a replacement industry, an exodus began. Today, the population is around 5,000 people, a drop of more than 75% from its height. The median household income is approximately $44,000 per year, with a poverty rate near 23%. Many houses sit vacant. Schools have faced closures due to financial strain, and the city experienced a serious fiscal crisis in the early 2000s. Duquesne is not entirely a ghost town, but it illustrates the stage just before true silence, when the buildings are still there. Yet, the economic foundation that once supported them has long since fallen away.